Barakatah Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem, Racha Kodash. Welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one is History and the Bible and Various Topics. And pretty much this is just based off of little reading I was doing last night. And I just wanted to touch on a couple of things that I was going through. You have biblical history and you have secular history. Just bear with me a second. Okay, you have biblical history and you have secular history. And there's certain events that are recorded in the scriptures that are also recorded in secular history. Secular history is world history. And there are different events that happen in the scriptures that are mentioned in secular or world history. And there's not a whole lot of detail on a whole lot of things, but some stuff is mentioned briefly by certain individuals. And the Lord, Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, made sure that certain things were jotted down. And as we always say, when you're dealing with the scriptures can either be for your welfare or they can be for a stumbling block, and this is why you're not going to see everything painted in black and white in the scriptures, because it's supposed to be a mystery. It's supposed to be a deterrent to those the Lord doesn't want, to stop them from getting the truth. And there's an actual angel out there that stops certain jakes from actually getting this truth. Just like there's, the Holy Spirit out there, which is, like a group of angels that give the understanding of this truth. It's a spirit, that works in conjunction with the Heavenly Father Yahweh and His Son Yahushai to open up the minds of the elect of the nation of Israel. And just like you have the elect that can see it, it's plain to the, to the holy. It's a stumbling block to the wicked. They won't be able to see it. So what I want to tap into is Luke, the 13th chapter. All right. And in Luke, the 13th chapter, the very first verse caused me to do like a little research. So it says, Luke 13:1, there were present at the season some that told him of the Galileans, dealing with Pontius Pilate, whose blood Pilate had mingled with their sacrifices. Now, one thing you have to understand about the Galileans, right? The region of Galilee, you had a lot of rebels that came out of that region, and there was a lot of uprisings, zealots, and, different individuals trying to come against the Roman Empire, because the Roman Empire, was infringing upon, certain of their, what they felt were their rights, as the people of the Most High, the Israelites. But what they didn't take into account was that it was a curse from the Lord because of the wickedness that Jake was doing. Let's see. How can I word this? Were there many rebels in Galilee in the Bible? Let's go during Yahushai's time. Yeah, let's just do it like that. AI overview. Yes, there were significant numbers of rebels and widespread resistance in Galilee during Yahushai's time. Particularly, this says there Jesus, but his name is Yahushai, particularly around the turn of the 1st century. That's when Yahushai was on the scene. CE, which is a common era, which we say there's another term, AD, which is Anno Domini, the year of our Lord, due to the Herodian and Roman rule. See, so they were rebelling against Herod, who is an Edomite, and against Rome, that were Edomites. It says the region was a hub for various revolts, including one led by Judas the Galilean, who founded the Zealot movement, which believed the Most High alone should be master and oppose Roman authority and taxation. And it's true, the Lord should be the only one that should be our Lord, but the Lord, gave us over to our enemies because of the fact that we went off. Let's go to Isaiah 26 real quick. And our elder Pastor Harb, brings this out, from time to time. I believe he said he heard it in a movie. Isaiah 26:13. O Lord, Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, our power, other lords besides thee have had dominion over us, but by thee only will we make mention of thy name. So yeah, technically, we only supposed to have the Most High over us, as a authority over us. But when Jake went off, the Lord put curses on us. So it says, which believed the Most High alone should be master and oppose Roman authority and taxation, which they were going off. Because if anybody had the right to oppose Roman taxation, right, wouldn't it be Yahushai? Yahushai didn't fight against that. He told Peter to go, get this fish in the sea, and the coin that he sees in the fish's mouth, pull it out and pay the taxes for himself and for Yahushai. And then he told, the wicked Pharisees and them, because they were trying to tempt him, he said, whose superscription do you see on this coin? He says, Caesar. He says, so therefore render unto Caesar what is Caesar, and unto the Most High what's the Most High. So he shut their mouth. You better shut your white mouth. Inside joke. So it says, alone to be master Roman authority and taxation. These events involved violent suppression, such as the crucifixion of rebels and the burning of cities, leaving a lasting impact on the population. So there was this uprising, this revolutionary, rebellious spirit against the Roman Empire in the region of Galilee. All right. So it says they were present, Luke 13:1, they were present at that season, some that told him of Galileans, whose blood Pilate had mingled with their sacrifices, because Pilate was an expert in putting down these revolts, And then when you start to understand, because the scriptures don't go into detail about it, just the main point here. But when you understand the dynamic of how Pontius Pilate was doing these things, and the cruelty that he used, according to some secular history, you understand, why he did the things that he did, and then you understand why, he was the governor. I believe it's the governor of that region, in Israel. You start to understand that dynamic, as to, why they would bring things to him, because, he was an expert at putting these, uprisings down. All right. So let's go here to the chat. I typed in, is there any, I meant to put any secular history on Luke 13:1. Luke 13:1 says, now there were some present at the time who told Yahushai about the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mixed with their sacrifices, NIV. This verse refers to a violent and shocking event involving Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, and some Galilean Jews, but it's mentioned only in the Gospel of Luke. There's no direct secular, non-biblical historical account of this specific incident. However, we can explore this a bit deeper to see what we can say based on known history. So this particular event that we're reading about, there's nothing in the secular history that speaks about it. But, Josephus did speak on the violent acts of Pontius Pilate against those rebels and against, Jake back then. Now, whether he was a Jake or not, we don't know. He might have been a Jake, but you have Sambos, and you got to understand, Sambos will go harder for Esau than Esau will go for himself. You get more mercy from an Edomite cop than you would from a Jake cop in most cases. So it says, is there any secular historical support for this event? No direct record of this incident exists in secular Roman or Jewish sources like Josephus, the main first century Jewish historian, Roman historians like Tacitus or Suetonius. So this particular event, there's nothing else outside of this Bible verse that spoke on it. But there is indirect evidence that supports this kind of behavior from Pilate. And when you understand, his character and what he did, that, well, first of all, it's in the scriptures. And second of all, when you understand some of the other things that he did to Jake, then you say, see, so there you go. So it says, what we know about Pilate from secular history. Josephus in Antiquities and the Israelite Wars, you see what it says there, tells us several things about Pilate. Pilate was brutal. He often suppressed Israelite uprisings with violence. He mingled Roman symbols with Israelite worship, offending Israelite customs. He once slaughtered Samaritans on Mount Gerizim, even though you had Jakes among them, and they were heathens, but they were nonetheless, they were calling themselves Israelites, right? And you had Jakes among them. Josephus, Antiquities 1885-87. He also once used temple funds to build an aqueduct, leading to protests. He sent disguised soldiers to kill the protesters. Israelite War 2, 175-177. All right. And you could see, this dude was devious, according to this history. Pilate didn't hesitate to kill Jews during religious events, or even in or near the temple area, especially if he suspected rebellion. So while Luke 13:1 is the only record of this particular event, Pilate's pattern of behavior makes it entirely plausible. And this is why when Yahushai came before him, Yahushai already knew his character, already knew the deal. That's why at first he wasn't talking to him. Because Pontius Pilate was questioning him, because he was, even though he wasn't born in that region, he was raised up in that region. So when he understood that he was raised up in that region, he said, this is probably another one of them rebels that I might have to deal with. So it says, but him being astute, he's like, nah, this man is different. This is a different scenario from all of that other stuff that's been going on. So he says, historical context of Galileans. Galileans were often seen as rebellious or zealot leaning. So any group from Galilee gathering at the temple could have been viewed with suspicion by Pilate. The phrase mingled their blood with their sacrifices implies they were likely slaughtered while offering sacrifices in the temple. An especially horrific offense to Israelite law and sensibilities. Scholarly interpretation, many scholars believe the event was likely real. It is real. Why? Because it's written in the scriptures. Just because secular history doesn't mention something doesn't mean it didn't happen. And that's the problem with Esau. Esau is a carnal man. He wants proof of all of these different things happening. And the Lord don't always give you proof, because, if that's the case, if everything was proof, then where would faith come in? And Esau is a carnal man. He's not a spiritual man. So it says the event was likely real. It is real. Preserved through oral tradition and known among Yahushai's followers. It shows the political volatility of Roman-occupied Judea. We're going to get into some precepts. I had jotted down a couple of precepts. Luke uses it to set up Yahushai's teaching about repentance and the uncertainty of death, not to dwell on political critique. So summary, the question and answer. Is there secular history confirming Luke 13:1? No direct historical source confirms it, that particular event. Is it historically plausible? Yes, based on Pilate's known brutality and violent suppression of Jews. Are there indirect sources or parallels? Josephus' writing confirms Pilate's violent actions against Jews. How do scholars view it? As a likely real event in line with Pilate's known behavior, even if not independently confirmed. Right, because they're saying it's probably happened. No, it did happen. It's just not written in history, just like everything. Like there's a lot of things happening today that are not being accounted. They're not being written down. And there's other stuff that is. So just because it's not written down and there's no record of it, does it mean it didn't happen? Think about it. So the next step, or he asked me, or Chad asked me, would you like a quote or summary from Josephus, relevant text for comparison? I said, yes. He said, here are two passages from Josephus that are often brought up in connection with Luke 13:1, or with the type of violence attributed to Pontius Pilate. They don't exactly match Luke's wording, but scholars see them as the closest historical parallels. So Antiquities of the Jews, 1885-89, the Samaritans tumbled on Mount Gerizim. Now keep in mind, the Samaritans were heathens, but you had Jakes that were among them. The woman at the well, she was a heathen, but her husband was an Israelite. And you had other men there and women that were Israelites, because when you understand the history of Samaria during the time of Yahushai, and even prior to that, the Sanhedrin, which was the council, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the lawyers, scribes, so on and so forth, they held councils, and anyone that was accused of breaking the law, or going against their traditions, they would charge, with heresy or whatever the case may be, blasphemy or whatever the case is, and they would deal with them and have them to be put to death by the Roman authorities, because they couldn't do it themselves. So what certain Israelites did, that either whether they were guilty or not, they would flee to Samaria, because Samaria was like a sanctuary for these Jakes. All right. So when they were labeled apostasy, when the label apostasy was put upon them, they were known as the apostate Jews. And there's history on that. Josephus goes into that. The apostate Jews. And they would flee to Samaria. That's why, do I have the, let me see something. Apocrypha GNT. I think that one goes into it a little bit. Apocrypha online. I think it's a GNT. I think there's other versions too, but I'm not 100% sure. So just bear with me. All right, so let's go to Sirach. Where are we at? Right, here we go. Excuse me. Believe it's either 50 or 51. Right here, 50 and 25. There are two nations that I detest, and the third that does not even deserve to be called a nation. These are the Edomites, the inhabitants of the Philistine cities, and the stupid Samaritans. Why did he say that? Because you had Israelites that were in Samaria that were considered to be apostates. You see? And then you also had the heathen there. All right. So, just to give you like a little brief history on that. So going back to the chat. So it says, Antiquities of the Jews, the Samaritan tumbled on Mount Gerizim. In this passage, Josephus describes a disturbance in Samaria under Pilate. Key elements: a figure who made light of lying, contrived everything so that the multitude might be pleased, incites the Samaritans by promising that Moses had deposited sacred vessels under Mount Gerizim. The people gathered armed in a village called Tirathaba. planning to ascend Mount Gerizim. Pilate sends troops, horsemen, and foot soldiers to prevent them. Some are killed in a flight, others flee, many are captured, and the chief leaders and powerful fugitives are executed. The Samaritans complained to Vitellius, then the Roman legate of Syria, that the people had not intended to revolt, but merely to avoid Pilate's harshness. Vitellius orders Pilate to go to Rome to answer the charge. It says, why scholars link this to Luke 13:1? Because Luke mentions people whose blood was mingled with their sacrifices by Pilate. The Josephus account has Pilate violently intervening while people are gathered for a religiously significant activity, ascending a sacred mountain, Gerizim, arguably similar in form to an offering or sacrifice situation, though Josephus speaks of the Samaritans, whereas Luke says Galileans. The parallels are strong enough to make that many think Luke may be drawn on a tradition that refers to the Samaritan episode or conflating elements. So this is the next one: Antiquity of the Jews, Jewish Wars or Israelite Wars, Aqueduct and Temple Funds Incident. Another example of Pilate's oppressive behavior comes from how he used temple funds for a public works project and the backlash from the Israelite population key part. Pilate uses sacred temple treasures to build an aqueduct. This provokes a riot. Tens of thousands protest. Pilate has soldiers disguise themselves among the crowd, then signals them to use clubs, not swords, to beat the protesters. Many die from blows or are trampled, fleeing the scene. Relevance. Though this history is not the same event as Luke 13:1, it shows that Pilate was known in Josephus' works for mingling religious wrongdoing, misuse of sacred money with political oppression, and for lethal suppression of religious or popular protests. It adds to the picture that something like the event in Luke 13 is plausible historically, even if not documented by secular sources outside of Josephus in a way that exactly matches Luke. All right. So my next question was, is that the reason Yahushai said, if my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight? Because he knew the reputation of Pontius Pilate. Yes, John 18:36, where Yahushai, Jesus says, my kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, then would my servants fight, that I should not be delivered to the Jews, but now is my kingdom not from hence. KJV. It is very much connected to the violent, politically charged atmosphere you see in Luke 13:1 and other Roman, Jewish, or Israelite interactions like the ones Josephus describes. Let's break this down carefully and directly in context. What Yahushai meant in John 18:36. He distinguishes his kingdom from the worldly systems. Yahushai is speaking to Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor. Pilate is trying to determine whether Yahushai is a threat to Rome, a political rebel, or king who wants to lead a revolt. Because you have to remember, based off of knowing the violent history of Pontius Pilate, this is, now you understand why they brought Yahushai to him, right? Yahushai's response is essentially, my kingdom isn't based on earthly politics, violence, or military power. If it were, you'd see my followers fighting right now. That's in contrast to the kind of zealot movement or Galilean insurrection Pilate was used to dealing with, as seen in Luke 13:1 and Josephus' histories. Those groups did fight. Number two, violence was expected of messiahs, but Yahushua rejected that model. In first century Judea, many so-called messianic figures claimed to be deliverers and attempted armed rebellions against Rome. Examples: Theudas, the Egyptian, Judas the Galilean, etc. Right. So these are examples which we have in Acts 5, around 38 or so, or actually a little further above, and other, and I believe that's Acts 21, when they thought that the Apostle Paul was that Egyptian that led a revolt against Rome, which was an Israelite that was called an Egyptian. More than likely could have been an Alexandrian Jew, that led a revolt against the Roman authorities. But all of those were put down. Why? Because they were not established by the Lord. And this is why the Apostle Paul said, not to resist the powers that be. meaning not to fight against them, because the powers that be are ordained, set up, established by the Most High Yahweh. And if you fight against them, you're fighting against the Most High. Okay? So it says, Pilate and Rome in general assumed any king of the Jews would try to seize power by force. That's why the claim was dangerous. And that's why Herod, that devil, he killed all of the children, children or boy children in Bethlehem, from 2 years and under, because he heard of the king that was coming, which is Yahushai, but the spirit, alerted Joseph, his father, to flee into Egypt with himself, Mary, and Yahushai. And then once Herod was dead and his son took over, when they came back, the angel told him they could come back now in a dream. All these happened in a dream. But when they were about to go, he was still nervous, so he went up into Nazareth. That's how Yahushai ended up there. But that was also set up in the spirit, because remember, Yahushai said he was set up for the fall and rising of many in Israel. So that was established as a sifting ground, a stumbling block, because Yahushua could have easily told those wicked Pharisees and Sadducees and them that, look, yeah, I am the Messiah. I was born in Bethlehem. This is why my father would go down there, and pay his taxes and so on and so forth, because I was actually born in that land. But what happened was, if you remember, going back, about 28 years ago or so, 30 years ago or so, when Herod ordered all of the children to be, the sons to be put to death from 2 years and under, because the king was supposed to be born, that was me. He could have easily quelled that if it was all about gathering all Israel. And that's why these guys, man, that call themselves leaders, they're fucking bugged out, because they're trying to gather all Israel. The Lord don't want all Israel. If he did, why didn't Yahushua just say, you know what, we're Israelites, let's put our differences aside. I am the Messiah, and this is boom, boom, boom. It would have been easy. But nah. That's why he spoke to the majority of people in parables, because this truth is not meant for everybody to get. You have those stumbling blocks. So it says Yahushua's statement on John 18:36 is a direct contrast to this expectation. He's saying, I'm not leading a rebellion. And, we extrapolated through Judas Iscariot's actions that Judas Iscariot really didn't want to betray the Lord, even though that spirit jumped on him to do so, because he saw that Yahushua had power. And he figured that if he forced, Yahushua to be brought to be crucified, that he would, use the power and take the Roman Empire down at that moment. And then once that demon left him, he went and brought back the money, because he felt guilty because that demon left him. Now this is not written in the scriptures. This is just an extrapolation that we use, because it makes sense that he did that, because he saw the power. He knew that Yahushua had that power. He said, man, if I get Yahushua, them to try to crucify him, he'll use the power and bring us into the kingdom. And remember, Judas Iscariot was a zealot. So it says Yahushua's statement in John 18:36 is a direct contrast to this expectation. He's saying, I'm not leading a rebellion. I'm not here to take power by force. My kingdom is spiritual and divine, not a political uprising. Connection to Luke 13:1. Yes, indirectly, Luke 13:1 refers to Galileans who were killed by Pilate, likely suspected of rebellion or dangerous religious political activity. Yahushua was from Galilee, so he was naturally under suspicion. He distances himself from those uprisings, saying, my kingdom is not of this world. My servants don't fight. In a climate where the Romans were ready to kill anyone associated with rebellion, even at the altar, Yahushua's kingdom had to be clarified as not a political revolution, but a spiritual transformation. All right. So we're going to read on, but let me read this again. Luke 13:1. They were present at the season some that told him of the Galileans who whose blood Pilate had mingled with their sacrifices. So let's go from there. Let's go to give you a couple more examples in the scriptures that this is so. Matthew 11 and 12. And from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven, which are who? The Israelites. How do we know that it's talking about the Israelites? Well, let's go to Luke 17. For those of you that don't know, there may be newer members. Luke 17 and 20. It says, and when he was demanded of the Pharisees when the kingdom of the Most High should come, he answered them and said, the kingdom of the Most High cometh not with observation, neither shall they say, lo here or lo there. For behold, the kingdom of the Most High is within you. So the kingdom of the Most High begins with the Israelites. That's what makes up the kingdom. This knowledge makes up the kingdom. And then there's going to be an actual physical kingdom as a physical reward on the earth for the faithful of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, the elect of the nation of Israel. All right, so going back, Matthew 11 and 12, and from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the violent take it by force. So the kingdom of heaven, the Israelites were suffering violence underneath the hand of the Romans. Why? Because it was prophesied. Let's go to Deuteronomy 28. And when you read Deuteronomy 28, these curses would follow us to every captivity we went to. And we suffered different things in different captivities depending on where we were at. Because obviously, if you're in a different land and you're suffering under your enemies, and you don't have land or crops or cattle, they're not going to the curses of him taking the cattle and and the fruit of the land and all that is not going to apply because you don't have any land at that point. But when we did have land, that applied in those particular captivities. It's very simple. So Deuteronomy 28 and 40, I'll start at 48, even though the point is 49, 50. All right, Deuteronomy 28, I'll start at 47. Because thou servest not the Lord thy power, Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, with joyfulness and with gladness of heart, for the abundance of all things, right? He gave us everything. He said, all I ask of you is just to follow these instructions. Therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies, which the Lord Yahweh Bashem Yahushai shall send against thee in hunger and in thirst and in nakedness and in want of all things, even up to this very day, in this captivity in America under Esau, the so-called white man. And he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck. Type in yoke of iron, on the neck. And then you could go to images and you'll see that they'll show you, even though now, it's harder to get, they'll show you images of Jake, the southern kingdom with yokes around their neck, yokes of iron. And then you have some pictures where you have Gadites with that around their neck too. But it was mainly fell on the southern kingdom because they were the ones that were brought over here on ships. It says, until he have destroyed thee. And you see that. Look at 2025. Look at the average Jake out there. And what the scriptures say? My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. The Lord shall bring a nation against thee from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth. What is Esau's symbol? The eagle. A nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand. A nation of fierce countenance, which shall not regard the person of the old, nor show favor to the young. So the kingdom of heaven suffered violence, and the violent, which is Esau, take it by force. And there's several precepts where it calls Esau the violent man. That's a lesson right there. Suffered violence, the word there is biadzo. Violence is biadzo. To use force, to apply force, to force, inflict violence on. Right? And let's look up the word violent. Biastes, strong, forceful. using force, violent. Didn't it say that the fourth kingdom? Let's go to Daniel 7:7. It says, after this I saw in a night vision, and behold, the fourth beast. The fourth beast is the Roman Empire, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly. And it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. So they used their force, their power, their military might as that iron kingdom to force people to be tributary to them. Now, they were laxed on religious, celebrations and religious practices and customs, but they demanded obedience. They demanded tribute. And when they didn't get it, they saw it as a threat, as a sedition, as an uprising. So they would put it down violently. Okay? And that's pretty much it on that. Okay? So now I want to segue. Oh, Salakia. So it says, supporting passages, Luke 22:49-51, when Peter draws his sword to defend Yahushai, he tells him to stop and heals the servant's ear again. He refuses violence. Matthew 26:52, all that take the sword shall perish with the sword. Zechariah 9:9, prophecy of the Messiah coming lowly, riding on a donkey, not as a warlord. That's right. He's coming back as a spiritual warlord when he comes back. Said, I will not meet thee as a man. He's coming back to wage war against Esau and the other nations and their armies. Summary, question answered. And John 18:36 related to the events like Luke 13:1. Yes, both invoke Roman fears of rebellion and messianic violence. Why does Yahushai say, my kingdom is not of this world? To make clear that he isn't leading a political rebellion like others before him. Does this explain why his servants didn't fight? Yes, his kingdom isn't based on worldly power or violence. So what I did was, in view of Pontius Pilate's violence, is that why his wife said not to have anything to do with that just man? Because she knew, his character and what he did to Jake. And then that particular day, the Lord gave her visions, and she suffered. She was suffering. She was like plagued by it. She told him, don't have nothing to do with that just man. Yes, that's a very plausible interpretation. Pontius Pilate's wife warning in Matthew 27:19 may reflect a deeper awareness of her husband's violent reputation and a supernatural or intuitive recognition that Yahushai was innocent and not like the rebels Pilate normally dealt with. And Pilate was astute enough. Here's this verse. When he was set down on the judgment seat, his wife sent unto him, saying, have thou nothing to do with that just man, for I have suffered many things this day in a dream because of him. Matthew 27:19. Key points in context. Pilate's background of violence. As we've already discussed, Pilate was known for using brutal force to crush Jewish Israelite dissent. He had executed groups during festivals, suppressed religious protests, and showed little regard for Israelite customs. Josephus confirms this. Pilate likely assumed Yahushai was another troublemaking Galilean, possibly leading a rebellion like others had. So Pilate was used to dealing harshly with perceived threats, especially Galileans, possibly like the ones in Luke 13:1, whose blood was mingled with their sacrifices. His wife's warning shows a contrast. Her message is sudden, urgent, and full of emotional weight. A few key details. That just man. She doesn't say this criminal, this rebel, or even this man, but specifically just. Greek dikaios, meaning righteous, innocent, morally upright. I suffered many things in a dream. In the ancient world, dreams were often seen as divine messages, especially in Roman and Israelite context. Interpretation. She likely recognized or was shown that Yahushai was not the kind of dangerous, violent figure her husband usually dealt with. Her warning could be both spiritual and practical. Don't stain your hands with this man's blood. He's not like the others. That's why eventually what happened? Pilate said he washed his hands. So what Jake said, let his blood be on them and on their children. Number 3, Pilate's response shows he agreed to a point. Despite his violent track record, Pilate is reluctant to condemn Yahushai. He declares, I find no fault in this man, Luke 23:4, John 18:38. He tries multiple times to release Yahushai. He ultimately washes his hands before the crowd, Matthew 27:24, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. Again, using the word just, echoing his wife's message. This shows Pilate may have felt conflicted, torn between his wife's warning, his own judgment, and public/political pressure from the Israelite leaders and crowds. Summary, point, explanation. Was Pilate known for violence? Yes. Josephus documents his brutality, especially towards Galileans and religious dissenters. Is that relevant to Yahushai's trial? Yes. Pilate likely assumed Yahushai was another rebel at first. Why did Pilate's wife warn him? Possibly a divine dream, spiritual insight. That's what it was. It was a dream. It was a vision. Or fear of unjust bloodshed. She knew Yahushai was not the kind of man Pilate usually executed. And she knew because the vision told her. Did Pilate listen? Partially. He tried to avoid responsibility, but ultimately gave in to political pressure. Yeah, and that's why he actually had his soldiers beat him. And then he turned them over, even though he didn't crucify him himself. All right, so now we're going to segue right into something else, to the other topics, but just bear with me real quick, and then I'll be right back. Over KD. Now, I was reading through Luke 13 and Luke 14 last night, and I ran across something that was interesting that I wanted to touch on. And before I read this, because I'm gonna go to actually, let's see, Luke. Actually, it was first in Luke 13. Let's go back to Luke 13. And this is dealing with, when anyone is sick, I'm not a doctor. I'm not giving medical advice. I'm just sharing information and knowledge, wisdom, and understanding from the scriptures. When anyone is sick, what it is not just a sickness. It's a spirit of infirmities. It's demons, that we are battling, that put or manipulate the body to feel or have these sicknesses, like in the case of Job, the prophet Job. Satan actually plagued them with boils. So these demons have power over the flesh. So it is a spirit of infirmity, as in the case of this first example we're going to get. It's called healing on the Sabbath, Luke 13 and 10. And he was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath. And behold, there was a woman which had a spirit of infirmity. See, so she had a spirit of infirmity 18 years and was bowed together and could in no wise lift up herself. Right. So she was folded. So you could understand, like you see people walking around, they'll have humpbacks and they'll lean to one side, or they're, completely bent over, and they can't straighten out. That's a spirit of infirmity. Those are particular infirmities, but it's actual demons that's causing them to be that way. Let's go real quick to spirit is pneuma, which is breath or air. Like you have pneumatic tools. Pneumatic tools function off of air. You have a compressor and you have a hose and you plug the whatever it is, whether it's a framing gun, a finished gun, or whatever, into that hose, and the air makes it function. And then that's why after a while, you use it, you have to, especially if you're using it, rapid, you have to stop because it kicks on and it has to fill back up. So spirit of infirmity, we have the word infirmity here is asthenia, want of strength, weakness, infirmity, feebleness of health or sickness. So you get the idea. So it's an actual spirit of sickness. All right. This is why it speaks about when you have a sickness. Let's go real quick to James chapter 5 and right, 14. Is any sick among you? Let him call for the elders of the church and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer of faith shall save the sick, and the Lord shall raise him up. And if he have committed sins, they shall be forgiven him. Right. So that prayer of faith will, move the demons off of that brother or sister so that they can heal from that sickness. And that's why people in the world, most of them go to the doctors and eventually they die because that spirit of sickness never leaves them. What Esau does is he masks, he treats symptoms. He doesn't treat root causes. So what he does, he puts a Band-Aid because he wants to make money. All right. So she had a spirit. So it's a spirit of infirmity. All right. It says, let's read it again. Luke 13:11. And behold, there was a woman which had a spirit of infirmity 18 years and was bowed together and could in no wise lift up herself. Matter of fact, let's look up the word bowed together. Did I look that up? Bowed together. No, I didn't. The word is sunkupto. Sun is with, sin with. Kupto is stoop. See, with stooping. To bend completely forward, to be bowed together. So that's a disease, but it's it could be a spinal cord disease. But overall, what it is, it's a spirit of demons, a spirit of infirmity. All right. So it says, and when Yahushai saw her, he called her to him and said unto her, Woman, thou art loosed from thine infirmity. Right. And you had these devils, these jakes, that used this woman, thou art loosed. And he laid his hand on her, and immediately she was made straight and glorified Yahushai. Now, was it this one? Just bear with me 1 second. No, this ain't the one. All right, so just bear with me. So what did he do? He actually put his hands on her, and the faith healed her. So what did Yahushua do? Pretty much he exorcised those demons off of the woman, and she was made whole, and then she was able to stand up straight. 18 years she was like that. had to walk around like that, sleep like that, eat like that, use the bathroom like that. And then just like that, Yahushai healed her when he pulled them demons off of her. All right? So let's go from there to the next example. This one is in Luke 14. Right? Luke chapter 14. Matter of fact, I just click right here. And 1. And it came to pass as he went into the house of one of the chief Pharisees to eat bread on the Sabbath day that they watched him. And behold, there was a certain man before him which had the dropsy. Right? Now let's go and look at that word dropsy. The word dropsy goes to the word hydropikos. Hydro or hydro is where you get the word water. And pretty much what the dropsy is pretty much water retention or edema. Okay? See right there, hydro, water. And appear right there. All right? And it doesn't go specifically dropsical, suffering from dropsy. But when you go here, it says, what is the dropsy in the Bible? There we go. In the Bible, dropsy is an obsolete term for edema. See? A condition involving the abnormal accumulation of fluid in the body's tissue, causing swelling. It is mentioned in the New Testament in Luke 14, 1-6, where Yahushai heals a man with dropsy on the Sabbath, an event used to highlight his divine power and authority over legalistic interpretation of the law. And that's why he used the law to cut them. Edema, dropsy is a historical name for edema. So now, let's go here, let's type in edema, definition, or meaning. Edema refers to accumulation of excess fluid in the body's tissue, leading to swelling. It can occur in various parts of the body, including the legs, feet, arms, and face. And that's pretty much because of an underlying condition. Right here, it says causes of edema, fluid retention. When the body retains more fluid than it excretes, such as due to kidney disease, heart failure, or certain medications. You know, so it's either something with the kidneys or something with the heart. But what does Esau do? He gives you pills or drains it or puts you on dialysis to get rid of those toxins or those poisons instead of, having you change your diet and exercise and do certain things, above all prayer, to get rid of, these conditions. You see? But that's what Esau does. All right. The main cause of edema is a buildup of excess fluid in the body's tissue, which can stem from increased capillary filtration, impaired lymphatic drainage. Yep, because your body has its own sewage system. And if there's something wrong with it, something clogged, and like I said, I'm not a doctor, I'm not giving medical advice, I'm just sharing information. If something is clogged or there's congestion, then the sewage system of the body can't work properly. That's why you have the liver, filtration. That's why you have the kidneys, filtration. That's why you have the lymphatic system, filtration. Captures the poisons and excretes the poisons out of the body. You see? But you have to put the right things in it. You can't, see with Esau, he'll give you a pill or pills, and then you could keep your own same diet. You could keep your same sedentary lifestyle. It don't work like that. Okay? Says impaired lymphatic drainage or conditions like heart, kidney, or liver disease. Lifestyle factors such as high salt diet, prolonged sitting or standing, and certain medications can also lead to fluid retention and edema. Right. And then just a bad diet, your seed oils, just Jake's diet, horrible. Soul food. Same thing with Ephraim, and the Latin tribes, they got the same diet that Jake got. It's just called arroz con gandules, rice and peas. Benjamin, rice and peas. Ephraim, arroz con gandules. Issachar, arroz con frijoles. So on and so forth. Rice and beans. So you get the idea. So the man had the dropsies. He had water retention. Okay, let's read that again. And behold, there was a certain man before him which had the dropsy. And matter of fact, Salakia, edema images. So you can see that? And how many people have you seen like that? And it could retain anywhere in the body. So you get the idea. Going back, it says, Luke 14:2, and behold, there was a certain man before him which had the dropsy, and Yahushai answered and spake unto the lawyers and Pharisees, saying, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath day? And let's see. And they held their peace, and he took him and healed him and let him go. Let me see. So healed on, is that there's a particular word I'm looking for. I didn't write it down. Right, heal. So matter of fact, it says, and they held their peace, and he took him and healed him and let him go. So when you look at this word healed, okay, Yaomai, let's go to this one here. To heal. To heal on the Sabbath, right? You have the word what? Therapeuo, where you get the word therapy. So who's the therapy for our diseases, for our sicknesses? Yahushai is that therapy. Okay? That's why when we go to Matthew chapter 10, let's go back there, Matthew 10 and 5. These 12 Yahushai sent forth and commanded them, saying, go not into the way of the Gentiles and into any city of the Samaritans enter ye not, because the Lord didn't send his men and his message to the heathens. It was only for the Israelites. But go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and as you go preach, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. To who? The Israelites. The Israelites. Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast out devils. Freely you have received, freely give. So this is what they were sent to do, to heal. That's why Yahushai went to heal them. He is the therapy for the healing. Everything stems from him. He is that therapy. So let's go over to Matthew 4. Couple more precepts and we'll close out. Matthew chapter 4, verse 23. It says, and Yahushua went about Galilee teaching in their synagogues and preaching the gospel of the kingdom and healing all manner of sickness and all manner of disease among the people. So let's go to some of these. So he preached the gospel. The faith is what healed them. The word for healing, therapio. You get the word therapy. Sickness, you have the word nosos. Nosos. Disease, sickness, right? Let's go back, and then you have the word disease. Malakia. Softness. In the New Testament, infirmity, debility, bodily weakness, sickness. And this is what he did. He healed, and he sent his men to heal. So it says his fame went throughout Syria, because you have a lot of Israelites in Syria. Remember the woman, the Syrophoenician by nation, meaning she was born in that region, in that land, and she spoke the Greek language. So she was an Israelite foreigner, and so was her daughter. And they brought unto him all sick people that were taken with divers diseases, and torments, and those which were possessed with devils, and those which were lunatic, and those that had the palsy, and he healed them. So let's look up some of these words. Syria brought unto him those that were sick, kakos. The word kakos. Miserable, to be ill. And it's a fucking it's a misery. When you feel like shit, you feel like hell, because it's a spirit of infirmity, and nobody wants to be around that. Nobody wants to be in that presence, because it's fucking depressing. The person doesn't even want to be around them among themselves. That's why it says that, death is better than a continual sickness, because it's fucking depressing. Not knowing from one day to the next if you're gonna drop dead, you're feeling all bugged out and crazy. It's a spirit of infirmity. It's demons. All right, going back. It says that were taken with divers diseases. Right here, divers is poikilos. Diseases, nosos, as we read already, and torments. This is, being tormented in the mind, depression, anxiety. These are all torments. Basanos. To touchstone, which is a black, this goes into like checking for the purity of gold and silver. The rack or instrument of torture by which one is forced to divulge the truth. Torture, torment, acute pains, of pains of a disease. Mental torture. Scripture say, give me any plague but the plague of the heart, and any wickedness but the wickedness of a woman. Okay, let's go back. Which were those which were possessed with devils. You see people out there. Daimonizomai, where you get the word demon from. Right here, daimon. Devils, devil. It says to be under the power of a demon. They're possessed. You see retarded people. You see people walking down the street. The Lord said he will smite Jake with madness. People talking to themselves, bugged out, sitting on the corner talking to themselves. Saw this one guy in San Francisco. He's standing there with dreads, and the dreads are in front of him, and he's just sitting there, just standing there. It says, and those which were lunatic. The word there is seleni atzomai, which the word Selena, that's moon. Right there, Selenen, moon. To be moonstruck or lunatic, to be epileptic, to have like epileptic fits. And all of these diseases are pretty much inflammation. And like Elder Pastor R said too, it's true. It's also parasites. It says epilepsy being supposed to return and increase with the increase of the moon. This meaning is doubtful, as the Greeks knew nothing of epilepsy. Yeah, they didn't know anything about epilepsy because the term epilepsy didn't exist back then. But was that disease back then? Yes. So a lunatic, certain times of the month. Now, when you ask, do people with epilepsy have more episodes during the full moon? They'll say no. There's no scientific proof of that. Whatever, blah blah blah, whatever. But the point is that it's a disease. Epilepsy is a disease, but it's a spirit of infirmity. Okay, so let's go back, see what else we got. Those who had palsy. Palsy is paraluticos, which is paralyzed. It's a paralyzing disease. Why? Because certain amount of congestion in the body and shutting down of certain nerves in the body cause that limb or limbs or part of the body or whatever the case may be to grow weak. So those channels have to be opened up. Right? Here it says paralytic, suffering from the relaxing of the nerves of one side, disabled, weak of limb. See? Going back. And what? And he healed them. Yahushai healed them. Going back to therapeuo, therapy. Yahushai is the therapy. To serve, do service, to heal, cure, restore to health. So Yahushai is that therapy. So the last precept I'm going to give you is the book of Malachi, chapter 4 and 2. But unto you that fear my name shall the Son of Righteousness, Yahushai, arise with healing in his wings, and you shall go forth and grow up as calves of the stall. So when Yahushai comes back, he's going to change these bodies that are subject to sin, that are subject to sickness and disease and all of that. You know? And once these bodies are changed, we're going to get those angelic bodies, so to speak, extraterrestrial bodies, that can be on the earth. They're superhuman bodies. And ain't no way in fucking hell that these other nations, Gog, the Russians are going to take us over and we got power. Esau ain't going to get back into power. Once this whole go down, it's over. These guys love fucking oppression. The scriptures don't lie. Say they trust in the fucking oppression. Like they ain't been fucking oppressed enough. And this shit, it shit angers you to see these guys that know better teaching this bullshit. And the only conclusion you could come to is either they're just that bugged out or they sold the fuck out. And we tend to lean on the latter. So let's look up this word healing. The word there is marapa, which is of healing. Healing. Health, healing, cure. So Yahushai is the cure. He is the therapy. Right? And then it says healing what? In his wings. Let's go to the word wings. See what it says for wings. The word there is kanap, which is wing, extremity, edge, wing, border, corner, shirt. That's dealing with what? Yahushai's chariot. So once the elect get beamed up and they go up to a certain height in the air, the bodies will be changed into the new bodies. The stony heart will be taken out, fleshy heart put in, the laws inserted into the innards, right? And once they hit the chariot, they're going to be perfected. That therapy, that healing will be complete. And that's part of the reason why it says that there shall be no more tears in the eyes of Israel once Yahushai comes back. Beginning with the elect. All right. So Yahushai is that therapy. He is the healing, the ultimate healing when he pulls up in that chariot. All right. So with that, I pray that you brothers and few sisters have been edified. I pray that this was an edifying lesson, and to the next time I say, Shalom.